The crypto comeback continues this week as both Bitcoin and Ethereum try to recover some of these substantial losses that they endured over the weekend. Well, for more on what caused these crashes and why both digital currencies are now soaring, I've got Francis Hunt in the studio with me from the Market Sniper. Hello to you. Thank you for your time. You are a digital expert on these currencies, and I just want to know why they crashed initially. What caused it?
Well, I think it's human nature. We did too much too soon, Katie. There were the top three coins were Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Ripple. And in fact, Ripple had a huge run up at 24. And it gave a very similar setup to what we've just seen on Bitcoin. And then it fell over all the way from the 24s right down to the 9s. That was on number 3. That temporarily went to number 2. Then we had Ethereum doing a big run up as I was attending New York Consensus. And it really overshot. It went extremely far. Remember, when we go melt up, rather than being too aggressive and adding to positions, it's often the end of a final stage. It's panic buying. It's fear of missing out, known as FOMO in the short term. So there was a lot of fear of missing out and everybody was doing a bit of a charge. So what's happened, there's a bit of toxicity in the system, too much fluff, not concerned with what has been achieved versus how the price has moved, and there was a bit of a divergence. Similar setup, we were warning against underperformance for Ethereum for a while, and that has occurred, and it's crashed, and it's been the weakest. Then Bitcoin was the safe haven of all the majors. So it was the last to roll because everybody first fled from one corner of the room to the primary safe haven corner of the room. And then we've actually seen a little bit of what's known as tether or even fiat currency being the safe haven while Bitcoin fell. And that brought the whole, almost if we can call it an asset class, down with it. For your technical fans, by the way.
Can we look at the chart then while we're talking about Bitcoin? Let's just have a look and see what happened. We can see this massive, where my arrow is here,
That's
massive
it. Now, I don't know if just by your moving average, your black moving average, you'll see there was a very stretchy red candle that broke down. Little bit more to your right. There's a nice squeeze there between those hammering lows, and we trade that low volatility moment. And this is a first move in a new trend. So it was a little bit of a foreboding event because sometimes you can get overperformance to that. It actually ran its geometric target. For those that of your followers that understand a symmetrical triangle, they'll know about that. And that's why we're having a little bit of a, in your case, it seems like a gap closure and a rally. That doesn't necessarily mean it's all over because this was a first move in a new trend. So a little bit of fear, big sell-off, and then a big bounce. The volatility is a little bit high at the moment. So I would be caution and let things settle.
What's next?
Either continuation downside or a calming down and a basing out, which would then eventually lead to upside continuation. So that's what we want to see. Is the volatility going down, and are we going to hold that low? In other words, upside will eventually develop again, or are we going to, is there going to be a second wave of panic selling? And that's going to be one of the keys.
But surely when it comes to volatility, that is what consumes Bitcoin.
It's a very volatile, the crypto market is generally very volatile. But when it gets extreme, you have to watch for those extremities. That's when you're getting close to a melt-up change. And of course, there's the 1st of August and all the decisions coming in there. There's a very interesting national element to it. You know, the miners, a large proportion of them are China, cheap power, and of course these guys make the chips, everything we use made in China, whether it's Apple or any of the other devices. And there's kind of a feeling miners versus users, and there's a national element to this, sort of China versus the rest of the world. So it's kind of like a national battle for the soul of Bitcoin. And that also leads into a very interesting area. I'm going to leave something for your folks to watch, but in the same way, China's going to want their own Ethereum, because Ethereum has gone a platform approach. But they don't want to use the Western, if it becomes perceived as a Western-based platform, because in the same way they have Baidu for Google in the West, the China wants their own. So keep an eye out for ANS and shares for the guys if that comes up. And we're a big fan of metal as well, which is not so much a play on the China, but a merchant provider to the cannabis industry and other legal industries, but that have been ignored by the banking system prior.
Okay, so it's more interconnected than we initially think in some ways. Let me just ask, if you're going to choose a digital currency, which one are you going to go for? Why?
Bitcoin has the benefit of time and a standard. So far the market has shown us when there is fear in the altcoins, it is still the refuge point. Kind of like the dollar in currencies. You know, in 2008, there was flight to dollar. Even though the subprime element emanated in the US housing market primarily in that. So I would say the Bitcoin is still the established boss, but it does need to show that it can adjust with the times and deal with its scaling issue and the transaction costs side of things. If this gets dealt with, markets hate uncertainty, Katie. And if this gets resolved, what actually happens is everybody is selling on the uncertainty, but then they buy strong on the resolution. So there could be strength coming back into Bitcoin if people like how things get resolved with the miners and the users.
So Bitcoin is still leading the pack when it comes to the digital currencies.
In terms of perceived safety, it is the lower beta version. If, in fact, at the moment, it looks like we've had a bit of a short squeeze on Ethereum, and it's really spiked very, very powerfully. And despite it selling off for a sustained period, it was very channel-based. So I do actually feel once every seller is out, and I think that event has probably occurred, Ethereum will go back to overperformance relative to Bitcoin. But as the August passes, we may initially get that strength on Bitcoin if people are happy with the resolution.
Okay, Francis Hunt, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your expertise, as usual, on digital currencies.